monetizamos en lugares chicos o en lugares donde no hay grandes medios o en lugares donde no hay demasiado tráfico. Y lo voy a dejar a Jeremy que cuente un poco cómo armó esta plataforma que pasó por, o él pasó por Y Combinator, no estoy seguro.
Thank you so much. Let's see if I can get this to load up here. There we go. I'm sorry I don't speak Spanish. It's as I look out in the audience, I'm realizing just how ill-prepared I am. So my name is Jeremy Mims. I'm the co-founder of a company called Own Local. We are based in the United States, and we are the largest digital ad agency that works with newspapers there. We automate a lot of processes. We make sure that newspapers are able to make a lot of money. And so far, we do this for more than 2,000 of them. Some large names that you might know include Tribune, Gatehouse Media, Digital First Media, Gannett, and many others. And our entire reason for existence, as I've described before, is that we are a for-profit company with a non-profit mission. Our job is to pay for journalism in the future. And I'm super excited about a lot of the things that I see out in the world today. There are all kinds of stuff like drones. I see all kinds of alternative publications. You see things like snowfall. And you can't help but think, wow, this stuff's amazing. It's incredible what technology allows us to share with an audience. It's amazing how impactful these stories can be. But the real problem is, I don't love that we can't really pay for it. That snowfall story cost 8 months of time. It cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce, a lot of custom coding. And that impactful story happened once, and then they don't do that very often. And the reason is they just can't afford to do it. And the New York Times can barely afford to do it. So imagine what the other thousands of little publications around America and around the world can't do either. And there's all these stories. This is a great project. 100 people are laid off. The joke here was 100 people entered and 100 people left, if you've ever seen Mad Max. Patch died. I love this quote. When the two companies announced that they were coming together, we said at the time there were going to be some synergies. And unfortunately for a lot of people today, we're realizing those synergies as he was firing 173 people. So this is the state of journalism in America. And the places where people are getting cut are in the newsrooms. So let me give you a quick snapshot of what's happening to newspapers in the US. And a lot of this is, I think, because the product that they're making isn't as good as it used to be. If we look at Tribune's stock graph, that's not so pretty. McClatchy, also not so pretty. Lee, not pretty. New Media, not pretty. And on and on and on. And this is happening in sort of a repeatable way. And this is really dangerous. In America, and I don't know if this is the case in the rest of the world, most of our news gathering apparatus exists in newspaper newsrooms. It doesn't exist in other places. And lots of other groups have outsourced their news gathering to a newsroom that's actually hurting. Now, the weird juxtaposition here is that more people are reading the newspapers than ever before. They're just reading them online. And monetizing this, though, has been extremely difficult. And there are some that hope that other groups will step up. People are hoping that TV will contribute, that radio will contribute, that online journalism sources will contribute. But to date, it's been very little. And even though newspapers are hurting, they just haven't stepped up in a way that can make a financial difference to how much it actually costs to run a really functional news gathering operation. It's just too easy to put together a listicle or to put together a video or give somebody the top 10 reasons you should rewatch Mean Girls or something like that. So even groups like Google and Craigslist and everybody else haven't really contributed very much. This is a project that Craig did, and kudos to him for contributing something. But Craigslist is responsible for decimating the classified revenue for newspapers. Classified revenue is a huge, important source, and the unfortunate thing is that revenue is not going to pay for journalism anymore. But in 4 years, $7.5 million. It's not enough. Here's Google. Google finally ponied up some money for journalism, $164 million. This is about 1% of the profit they made last year. But they did it because they're afraid that the European Union is going to kind of trust bust them and give them some antitrust breakup rules. So they're actively working to try to stop that. But even still, $164 million for a company the size of Google doesn't really seem to suggest that they care very much about journalism. So I'm a big fan of openness. I love transparency. I love the kinds of things that people build. But the real danger in my market, and probably in yours soon if it's not already the case, is that journalists don't have jobs. Journalists don't get hired, or they get fired, they get left alone. And for all this great work and all these great tools and all these amazing things that everybody here is working on and building, there might not be the resources behind it to do this hard-hitting journalism. And in the US, newspapers are really running out of money, and from my perspective, we are running out of time. So what can we do? There are lots of things, and I said I would talk about diversifying revenue today, and there are many things. We see events supplanting some revenue. We see alternative publications coming up that are online only that are generating some revenue. We see alternative forms of advertising coming up that are helping fix some of these broken banner ad systems. But the biggest innovation that we have in the US is cost cutting. What we are seeing more now than ever is shrunken newsrooms. We are seeing for every layoff that's happening, or every 2 layoffs, one of them is a journalist. And what this has meant is that the quality of coverage has gone down, and really what that's meant is that advertisers don't necessarily feel like they need to be there anymore. And I describe this to a lot of people as a Wile E. Coyote syndrome. And I don't know if you've ever seen these cartoons, but the coyote is perpetually running off the cliff, and he thinks everything is fine, but then he looks down and drops. But what's happening very often is, just like the coyote, he has a misplaced belief that technology will fix everything. He's always ordering out of the Acme catalog. He is always saying, you know what, the next gadget, the next thing is the thing that's going to let me catch the Roadrunner. And it's never true. And he's always running off the cliff. Newspapers, as technologically averse as they are, have a fundamental belief and a hope that technology is going to come along and save them. And they hope it's one piece of technology. And the reality is it's probably a whole lot. So at Own Local, we do one thing. We try to do one thing well, and that is the digital ad agency. And a digital ad agency is maybe not a fancy term. I don't think it's new, and we certainly didn't invent it. But this is a multi-billion-dollar revenue stream for US publishers. This is an area where their relationships and their trust in their community allow them to work with their small businesses to kind of find additional ways to make money. So Own Local contributed about $50 million in new revenue to newspapers last year. We're hoping that this coming year it will be closer to $100 million. But the idea, and I should say that this is also just a drop in the bucket. This doesn't even begin to cover all the costs of paying for a newsroom, but it's a start. But newspapers need to sell what small businesses want or need to buy. And in our experience, that's things like websites, search engine optimization. We're not a huge fan of search engine marketing or SEM. Most of that money goes right to Google, and Google doesn't care that much about journalism, except as they're able to monetize it themselves. Things like banner ads, retargeting, programmatic spelled incorrectly, email, social media management, and there's a lot of other things that go in there. But this is an area where we've been able to contribute. It's an area that we're passionate about helping. And we are able to make sure that newspapers can sell something that's not just a print advertisement, and also not just a banner ad on their website. But we believe that rebuilding the bridge between small businesses and hopefully an institution that cares, and that is not always the case, we might be able to pay for news again in a way that it deserves to be paid for, in a way that all of these great tools and technologies and interesting things that people are developing can be utilized in a productive way. So diversifying revenue from our standpoint needs to be on the mind of every publisher in the world. What's happened in the US over the last 10 years is happening much faster in other countries. Anecdotally, I was in Colombia 2 weeks ago, and we heard about how smartphones are really just making a big dent there. We talked with some publishers in Malaysia, and they saw the same collapse in revenue in 2 years that took 10 years for the United States to get to. Technology makes things move faster, and we don't have as much time as we think we do. When we time travel and say, okay, you're in a part of the world where these things might not be, or you're in a part of this world where newspapers are still strong, that is increasingly not the case, and it can sneak up on us even faster. So I would like you to join us for a hackathon project tomorrow. We are going to be talking about how you can use our API, and I think that the thing we can build tomorrow will pay for a single journalist in every single market that we work in, and probably the ones that you know in the world. And if you want to come find me, one of my favorite things to do is talk about how we pay for the news. If you have great ideas, I'd like to have that conversation. We are always looking and experimenting, and we also know that Own Local is not the only thing that needs to happen. Many, many things need to happen in order for newspapers to be saved, in order for journalism to be funded. Thank you so much for your time today, and appreciate it. Muchas gracias.